When night falls, the world of sleep opens a secret door. In the quiet realm beyond dreams, a drifting narrator unfolds the myths of old, not with thunderous declarations, but in gentle whispers that soothe and stir, guiding you into a journey where the gods aren't distant legends, but soft echoes in the stillness. Before there was anything, before sound or motion, before even thought, there was silence. Not the silence of a quiet room, or a world after the rain, but the deeper kind, the stillness that holds no time, no form, no memory, a hush so complete it stretched beyond stars that had yet to be born. In that eternal stillness, in the immeasurable hush, there was only chaos. But chaos was not chaos in the way we often think of it. There were no storms, no tumbling waves, no angry howls. No, chaos was gentle. Chaos was soft, a drifting, undefined breath in the void, neither light nor darkness, neither shape nor emptiness. It simply was. And from this vast, floating breath of nothingness, something stirred, slowly, softly, as though a thought tried to form in the dreams of a sleeping giant, as though the darkness blinked. And then came Nyx, the night. But not the kind of night we know. Nyx was not born of stars or moons. She was the essence of night itself, thick and endless, warm and cool, all at once. She blanketed the stillness with a presence both velvet and infinite, a quiet so pure it seemed to hum in the soul of the cosmos. Nyx did not speak. She simply was, and her being was comfort, calm, and slumber. She floated like a sigh, a long, restful exhale across the sleeping void. Wherever she drifted, she left behind a trail of dreams, strange, formless things that blinked in and out of being. Some of those dreams became shapes, some became shadows, and some just faded again into silence. Soon, from Chaos and Nyx came others. There was Erebus, the deep shadow, the darkness that exists not in the absence of light, but in the very bones of stillness. He walked beside Nyx in perfect peace. Not lovers, not siblings, just presences, beings of a world that had no time, no names, no need for such things. And in time, Nyx whispered children into existence. She did not cry out, she did not labor. She merely breathed. In that breath came the first of many quiet entities. There was Hypnos, sleep itself, a god who lived not in temples, but in the lids of tired eyes and the heavy sigh before slumber. He was gentle, soft-fingered. His touch wrapped around restless thoughts and turned them to mist. He had no voice, only the silence between heartbeats when the world begins to fade. Then came Thanatos, the death that comes without pain. He was not a villain, not a terror. He arrived like a soft wind in autumn, guiding souls to rest. His presence was inevitable but never cruel, and he too, like his brother Hypnos, moved without sound. And so, in this newborn universe where no stars had yet bloomed, there were no battles, no flames, no gods in golden armor, just the drifting dance of shadows and sleep. Then came Gaia, the earth. She did not erupt, she did not fall. She blossomed, like a flower slowly unfolding in a dream. From the void beneath chaos, she rose with the patience of centuries. Her body was not stone or soil, but the idea of form. She was stability in a world of drifting shadows, a ground upon which stories could walk eventually. Gaia was the first to settle, to stay. Where Nyx drifted, Gaia held. Where chaos expanded, Gaia centered. She became the silent heart of the world to be, and with her presence others emerged. Uranus, the sky, arched gently above her, not from love, not from will, but from the soft, inevitable pull of existence. He hovered above Gaia like a canopy of thought, both close and impossibly far. Together, without speaking, without ever moving quickly, they began to shape what would one day become everything. There were no seas yet, no trees, no people. But in the long quiet of their gaze, in the wordless presence of sky above and earth below, the world began to dream itself into form. And from these dreams came mountains, still and heavy, oceans, rippled only by breath, winds, so soft they didn't disturb even the silence. Nothing rushed, no gods declared war, no tempests shattered the peace, just the slow, quiet birth of being. There was Eros, the stir of love and longing, not yet romantic, not yet passionate, but the gentle magnet that pulled things toward each other. The soft gravity between night and day, shadow and spark. Eros didn't speak either. He just nudged, gently, always gently. And thus the world began, not with thunder, but with a whisper. The story of the universe did not scream into being. It floated, it settled, it exhaled. In this first breath of existence, where all was stillness, sleep, the foundation was laid, not of stone, but of silence. And it is said that even now, Beneath the stars and seas, beneath the cities and storms, that ancient silence still lingers. It cradles the roots of mountains. It hums behind the stars. It echoes in your breath G as you drift B towards sleep. After the hush of chaos, and after the slow breath of Gaia and the silent arc of Uranus above her, the world began to settle. The first whispers of form had been laid. A sky, an earth, the distant shadows of night and sleep. But now a rhythm began to pulse, soft and low, like the heartbeat of a mountain, barely audible, almost imagined. From this rhythm came the first children of Gaia and Uranus. Not children as we know them, not with flesh or bone, but vast beings of concept and cosmos, timeless, towering, yet somehow still gentle. They were the Titans, not monsters, not thunderous giants, but presences, still, patient, immense. There were 12 of them, drifting into being one after another. Not in a rush, not in a line, but like clouds emerging from fog, each one slow, quiet, complete in their stillness. First was Oceanus, a ring of water that flowed without waves, without storms. He did not crash or roar. He circled the earth softly, endlessly, embracing it with liquid silence. His face was broad and old, eyes deep like wells of thought, and his movement was barely movement at all. Just a flow, a suggestion of presence. Then came Tethys, Oceanus's counterpart, not his wife in the human sense, but a reflection, a mirror of his peace. She was the wellspring, the mother of gentle waters, the streams that would one day trickle through meadows not yet grown. When she breathed, rain clouds formed. When she blinked, dew gathered. Together, they birthed rivers not with effort but with sighs, lakes with pause, springs with stillness. Then Hyperion, the quiet flame, a sun, god not yet aflame, but glowing, softly, like embers beneath the ash. His face always looked eastward, where dawn had not yet been born. He held the idea of light, not in bursts or beams, but in warmth that could be felt behind closed eyes. With him came Thea, vision incarnate. She did not see with eyes, but with awareness. Her gaze stretched across realms not yet drawn. She was light's reflection, the shimmer on still water, the glint of gold hidden in stone. Their union, wordless and timeless, would one day give rise to celestial body as Helios, Selene and Ease, but not yet. For now, they only waited and dreamed. 'Cause was the mind in silence, he did not speak, yet he understood. Not knowledge as humans gather it, but presence of thought. The steady turning of reason, the echo of knowing something without needing to say it aloud. His partner was Phoebe, the whisper of prophecy, not loud visions or shrieking omens, but quiet certainty. She held the future in the palm of her thought, like a still pond holding the reflection of the moon. There was Crius, the unremembered Titan, a bridge between stars and time, who left little behind but a trail of calm distance. He was a boundary, a horizon line, always present, never loud, a Mnemosyne memory. Mnemosyne, she carried the stories that had not yet been told. She walked through silence, collecting the breath of moments. She was not chatter or noise, but the slow recording of what was, etched not in stone, but in the fabric of time. Every dream you forget when you wake, she holds it still. Then came Iapetus, still as stone, quiet as gravity. He was the thought of mortality, of consequence. Not in fear, but in awareness. He stood unmoved beside Clymene, whose name fades like mist. From them would come Prometheus, the silent fire thief, but that tale sleeps still, curled within their unspoken dreams. And finally, there was Cronus. He was the last to rise, and the slowest. Time, before clocks, before seconds, before sunrises marked anything. Cronus was the slow erosion of stone, the way mountains crumble over millennia. He did not rush, he could not. For time, real time, moves only one way, forward, and Cronus was its embodiment. He held a sickle, but not yet to strike. It rested by his side, not a threat, just a symbol, a shape, a placeholder. The Titans ruled not with fury, but with patience. There were no wars, no voices, just presence. Their dominion was not built with thunder, but with consistency. Aeon after aeon passed like drifting clouds. They stood, moved, watched, became the silent bones of the cosmos. They sculpted nothing. They commanded no armies. They simply were. And in their being the world began to take subtle shape. Under their silent watch, the seasons formed, quietly. Warmth began to follow cold. Day began to hink at night, not in sharp transitions but in gentle, indistinct gradients. The world was not born in a moment. It unfolded, and high above, Uranus still arched across the sky. His silence had grown distant, aloof. He watched Gaia, who had grown lush and dreaming. From her the Titans had come, and from her now came more. Creatures strange and vast, children of earth and sky. Some were beautiful, others not. The Cyclopes, with their single, unblinking eye, were not terrifying then, just focused, always watching. Their presence was weighty but calm. Then the Hecatoncheires, the hundred-handed ones. Not flailing monsters, but beings of motion, endless and fluid. Their many arms moved in silence like seaweed swaying in the current of a forgotten ocean. But Uranus grew uneasy. He did not speak it aloud, but Gaia could feel it. The tension, the quiet resistance in the stars above. Uranus began to press down, tighter and tighter on Gaia's surface. His sky became not a shelter, but a lid, a pressure, a burden. And Gaia, though patient, grew wary. She called to her children, not with words, but with feeling, a quiet yearning, a silent plea. Most of the Titans turned away, afraid to disturb the hush. But Cronus listened, not because he desired war, but because he understood time's nature, that even stillness must turn. He took the sickle Gaia gave him, not in anger, not in haste, but inevitability. One night, or what one day be called night, Cronus rose. He reached toward Uranus, not to kill, not to scream, but to separate. The sky and the earth, once fused in eternal stillness, now drifted apart, slowly, peacefully, like a breath held far too long, finally released. From the cut came stars, and blood, and the first hint of change. Cronus did not celebrate, he did not weep, he simply stood, holding time, watching the silence move. And from Uranus's fall came other beings, dark and strange like the Furies, born from blood, an Aphrodite said by some to arise from the foam. But even these were gentle in their first appearance, not gods of chaos but echoes of transition. Cronus now ruled, but the silence remained, a slower rhythm, perhaps. A more aware hush. His reign was one of twilight, a time between beginnings and endings, a time when stars blinked open slowly, when the earth turned without rush, when stories hovered like dust in warm light. The other Titans watched, waited. Some created, some faded, but none disturbed the peace. And though the next generation would come, Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Hades, their stirrings lay far ahead, tucked in the deepest corners of Gain's thoughts. For now, the Titans stood, vast, patient, quiet, in the twilight of time, when the world was not yet loud, and still the silence held you, wrapped you, carried you deeper by into sleep. Time, when it lingers long enough, does not stand still. Even the most patient rhythm must someday shift. Cronus, the Titan of time, had ruled not with wrath, but with silence. His presence was steady, unblinking, like the ticking of a celestial clock too large to hear. His reign was not marked by monuments or songs, but by the slow passing of ages and the long shadows that quietly moved behind him. Yet even Cronus had listened once. He had heard Gaia's silent yearning when Uranus pressed too tightly, and in answering her, he had risen. He had taken the sky from the earth. He had carved space into the cosmos. But time is never without consequences. After taking Uranus's place, Cronus stood not as a tyrant, but as a still point, a pillar holding up the hush between past and future. Yet a soft, persistent worry began to ripple through him, barely felt at first, like a breeze brushing across a mountain. He remembered a whisper. Not a voice, but a sensation, from Uranus, falling. Your own child will replace you, as you have replaced Meg. Cronus, who had once acted out of inevitability, now acted out of fear. But even his fear was quiet. He did not rage. He did not shout. He simply prepared, slowly, carefully. When his children were born not of flesh but of divine thought, born from Rhea, the gentle queen who walked like moonlight, Cronus did something silent and strange. He swallowed them, one by one, without pain, without struggle. Hestia, Hera, Demeter, Hades, Poseidon, each child just a glimmer, a flicker of godhood, disappeared into the hollow chamber of time. He thought this would keep the prophecy at bay, that if his children remained within him, like hours never passed, he could rule forever in twilight, in balance. But time cannot hold back the future forever. And Rhea wept, not loudly, but inwardly, like rivers sinking into stone. She loved Cronus still, perhaps, or perhaps she only mourned the stillness. but something within her stirred, a quiet rebellion, a yearning for change, not chaos, for motion, not destruction. So when her sixth child came, she did something soft but firm. She hid him, not in a temple, not in a fortress, but in a cave. A cave on Crete, wrapped in shadows, watched by nymphs and goats and guarded not by swords but by song. This child was Zeus, his name still small, his breath still shallow, but within him pulsed a rhythm unlike any before. He grew not with roars, but with wonder. The stars spoke to him in silence. The stones hummed when he stepped. The wind wrapped around him like prophecy. The nymphs whispered lullabies, and in those soft words, Zeus learned strength, not brute strength, but presence. And while Cronus ruled above unaware, time began to twist inward. Inside the belly of the Titan, his children, still whole, still alive in the hush of timeless digestion, waited, and Zeus rose slowly. He did not climb like a hero. He did not fight dragons or armies. He simply returned. He walked into the world when it was ready, when Rhea's sorrow had turned into quiet resolve. With Gaia's guidance, a whisper in the roots of the earth, and with the help of Metis, the soft goddess of clever thought, Zeus devised a plan not of war but of restoration. He approached Cronus not with weapons but with drink, a potion, smooth, subtle, not to poison but to unlock bind. Cronus drank, and from within him, one by one, the swallowed gods emerged, not in pain but in release. First Hestia, warm and steady, then Hera, watchful, Demeter full of promise, Hades with eyes like distant caves, Poseidon, swirling with deep tides. They did not burst forth with shouts or vengeance. They returned, as if waking from a long, heavy sleep, and together they looked toward the old world. Cronus watched them unmoving. He did not rage. He did not plead. Perhaps he knew, he who held time, that this was always the end of his chapter, that even stillness pass its torch to motion. Still, the transition was not immediate. A war, yes, but not one of thunder. The Dynamachy, as it would one day be called, began like a storm that gathers beyond the horizon. Long, slow, not in shrieks but in standoffs, in silences broken by movement, in loyalty and division measured not by violence but by direction. Some titans stayed with Cronus, old loyalties unmoved. Others, like Prometheus, son of Iapetus, drifted toward Zeus. Thoughtfully, they saw not rebellion but renewal. The earth shook, not in fury but in awakening. The sky shifted, not in collapse, but in stretch. Olympus, still a hill then, began to glow. And finally Zeus stood, not above, but among. He did not declare himself king. He simply acted like one. He moved with certainty. He called not for war cries, but for balance. He gathered his siblings. They did not kneel. They aligned. And when the final confrontation came, between Cronus and Zeus, it was not a clash, but a turning, a wheel completing a cycle. Zeus reached out not to destroy, but to replace. Cronus stepped back, not in defeat, but in completion. And the age of Titans dimmed. They did not die, they faded, retreating into caves, into oceans, into memory. Some, like Atlas, bore weight. Others, like Mnemosyne, became whispers in the minds of poets. And the new gods, Olympians, stood in soft light. They were younger, but not loud, powerful, but not yet defined. They would shape the world to come, but not all at once. For even Zeus in his triumph sat not on a golden throne, but on stone, atop Olympus, letting the wind curl around him. There was no feast, no parade, just a sigh if the cosmos itself exhaled. One age ends, another begins, and still the silence remains. You may hear it now, beneath your own breath, in the moments between thoughts, in the pause before dreams begin. It is the silence of transition, the quiet of a world that changes without noise. The hush before sleep becomes sleep, and so we drift onward toward Chapter 4 by into the dusk of Olympus. The Titans had faded, not vanished, not defeated, just dimmed, like the final light of dusk slipping below a quiet hill. And from the long twilight the Olympians arose, but not as thundering gods atop a golden throne. Yet, at first, they were simply there, gentle figures emerging like reflections in still water, their presence soft but undeniable. They gathered not in palaces, but on a mountain, not the highest peak, not the sharpest, but the one that waited, the one that stood just tall enough to touch the clouds and just quiet to hear the sky's breath. Mount Olympus, not a mountain of storms or fury, but of still, drifting mists, where each god could sit apart and yet remain close. where silence echoed gently and time passed with the rhythm of clouds. Zeus, who had risen in patience, now sat in watchfulness, not with a crown, but with presence. His gaze was calm thunder, the kind that never breaks, only rumbles faintly on the horizon. He said little, but the world began to listen. Beside him, Hera, queenly without asking, she moved like law itself, graceful, unmoved. Her eyes saw into order, and her silence often spoke louder than commands. Where Zeus ruled with storms hidden in stillness, Hera ruled with shape, boundaries, vows, invisible lines that held the sky together. They were not alone. Poseidon sat close, though always a bit apart. His mood shifted like waves, but today he was calm. The sea within him rested. He did not speak, but if he had, his voice would have sounded like surf against sand, rhythmic, patient, a memory of motion. Hades stood in the shadow of the mountain, not hiding, not unwelcome, but content. His realm was beneath, yes, but not evil, just deep, rooted. His silence was heavier than the others, a silence that pressed against the bones and pulled the gaze inward. He did not seek the light, nor fear it, he simply balanced it. Demeter, with hands full of imagined harvests, breathed life into still earth. Grasses whispered around her feet though none had yet grown. She was the hush of spring before it blooms, the stillness of a field before dawn. Her touch carried nourishment, and her quiet presence hinted at green yet to be born. Hestia warmed them all, not through speech but through presence. The flicker of home, the hush of a fire crackling in a distant room. She kept no throne, claimed no dominion, but the gods gathered where she sat. She made Olympus feel less like a peak and more like a hearth. They were gods not of chose, but of calm, not yet myth, but moment. Not loud, never loud. Their powers stirred not in the sky, but in the fabric of the world. At dusk, the air was heavy with potential. The sky purpled. The stars blinked, as if remembering themselves. Olympus breathed. And into this soft chamber of beginnings came others. Hephaestus, born of quiet labor, not yet a smith, but already carrying the silence of craft. Every movement deliberate, every breath aligned with rhythm. He did not boast of what he would build. He simply began to shape space around him. Tools would come. Forge would follow. But the hum of creation already circled him. Aphrodite, perhaps born of sea foam, perhaps of sky's severed sorrow. But here now, nonetheless, she did not walk. She drifted. A presence felt before it was seen. Love, not in passion but in pull. She drew the eyes, the heart's hush. Beauty as peace, as pause, as breath taken before speech. Athena came, not yet armored. Her silence was that of thought sharpening itself. She stood tall, still whole. She was not born to rage. She was born from wisdom itself. Born not from womb, but from mind, from Zeus and yet apart. Her presence was the quiet between decisions, the peace between strategies. Then Apollo, radiant and poised. His silence was melody waiting to form. He looked toward the horizon not with pride, but with understanding. Light, knowledge, prophecy. All these danced in his golden gaze, and yet he remained still, waiting for the right chord, the right sunrise. And Artemis, twin and mirror, night to his day, huntress of hush, she did not run or leap. She simply stood, calm, one hand resting on unseen bow. Her feet knew the earth, her eyes knew the sky. She was moonlight walking across leaves without a sound. One by one, the pantheon of Olympus gathered. Not with trumpets, not with flames, but like stars coming into view one at a time, in silence. They looked upon the world, and the world looked back. Still wild, still formless in places, but listening. The rivers paused, as if unsure of their direction. The hills waited for names. The winds turned in slow circles, and so the gods began to whisper shape into the world. Not commands, not decrees, just intentions, possibilities. Zeus lifted his hand, and the sky settled. Poseidon stepped forward, and the seas deepened. Hades turned his gaze downward, and caverns opened, slow and vast. Demeter walked, and roots dreamed of growing. Athena thought, and cities stirred in distant futures. Apollo smiled, and dawn remembered how to rise. No fire fell, no battle rang, only becoming, only being. At dusk, when the sun slid into silence, the gods remained seated, watchful, unhurried. Their time would come. Myths would rise, mortals would be born and lost and born again. But for now, there was only Olympus. a still peak above a quiet earth, and you rest beneath it, hearing their story as a lullaby of stars. The fire in Hestia's hearth flickers softly. The winds above Zeus rustle like curtains. The waves beneath Poseidon sigh like dreams. And slowly, the dusk grows deeper. You drift toward sleep. As Olympus fades into evening, be quiet as always. In the realm above the world, where the sky meets the silence of thought, a presence stirred, not loudly, not with thunder, but like the moment just before realization, when your breath holds and a thought begins to shape itself in your mind. That was how Athena came into being. She was not born as others are born, not from union, not from longing, not from cries. She was born from the mind, from Zeus, the sky father, the great holder of storms and balance. But this was not a birth of chaos or pain. It was a moment of clarity, a moment where divine thought crystallized into form. A presence coalesced from idea to entity. Zeus had swallowed Metis, goddess of wisdom, long ago, not to destroy her, but to contain her, for he feared a prophecy, feared the strength of children born from cleverness. But wisdom is not so easily silenced. It grows quietly, like roots beneath stone. And deep within Zeus's mind, Metis whispered not resistance, but understanding. She did not fight him. She became part of him. Her wisdom flowed into his thoughts. Her quiet became his quiet. And slowly, from this inner stillness a new form emerged. Athena. She did not arrive with screams or flames, no. She stepped forth, fully formed, armored, radiant, not with anger, but with readiness. Her armor shimmered softly, not with war, but with precision. Her shield bore the aegis, not as a threat, but as a mirror, reflecting fear back upon itself. Her spear was steady, her gaze calm, her breath even. She looked at Zeus and nodded. She did not cry. She did not ask why. She simply was. The other gods paused. They had seen birth. They had seen power. But this was something different. Athena walked across the marble of Olympus without a sound. Where she stepped, order followed control. Not coldness, but form, pagic. The kind of peace that comes not from silence alone, but from understanding. She was not war, but strategy, not fiarity, not chaos, but mind. And so, the mountain welcomed her. Hera watched her carefully, not coldly, but curiously. Poseidon turned his gaze to the sea, remembering their future rivalries. But for now, there was peace. Apollo inclined his head, recognizing another bearer of light. Artemis nodded once. Moonlight meeting moonlight. And Hestia, always the first and the last, simply smiled. For Athena brought a stillness that felt like home. In the world below, cities were not yet born, temples not yet built, but something had changed. Mortals not yet shaped began to dream of walls, of halls, of books, of justice. Somewhere in the minds of yet-to-be people, the idea of law was born, not as punishment, not as dominance, but as harmony. Athena did not need to raise her spear to command respect. She stood and the wind hushed. She moved and time adjusted. She sat beside her father, not beneath, not above, beside, and she listened. That is what made her divine. Not just what she said, but how deeply she listened. To the murmur of the earth, to the questions in men's hearts, to the doubt in the eyes of rulers, to the hope in the hands of the weak. She heard them all. And she offered not answers, but paths. Athena was the crossroad. She was the decision made in silence. The final breath before the first move. The ink before the word. And when mortals finally stood, walked, built, Athena was there. Not guiding their hands, but guiding their minds. In one dream, craftsman laid down his hammer, unsure where to carve next. And in the silence he heard her voice. Not loud, not spoken, but present. He carved a door. And behind it, a new room, a new idea. In another, a young woman sat beneath a fig tree, wondering if her words meant anything. And Athena's calm wrapped around her like a shawl. She stood and spoke, not with fury, but with reason. And others listened. Her symbol was the owl, not a bird of prey, but of watchfulness. Its eyes wide, its wings soundless, its presence unseen until it was needed. Athena moved like that, not to be noticed, but to be known. She was not a goddess of temples at first. She was the goddess of thought before speech. And when the first city was dreamed into being, it was hers. Athens, not just a name, but a promise. A city of learning, of justice, of reason, of art, where wisdom would sit beside beauty, where law would walk with mercy, where the sword would be held but not always used. Back on Olympus, Athena sat with a scroll in hand, though no one had taught her to read. She did not need teaching. She remembered the unwritten. She understood the unspoken. She carried in her mind the architecture of what could be. And as night fell on Olympus, she stood again. She walked the corridors, past gods and firelight and stars. She did not look back, because she didn't need to. Her steps were always forward, not rushed, not loud, just sure, just soft. And so she walked still, in courtrooms, in libraries, in dreams where decisions must be made. In the still pause before a storm, you may have heard her before, when you chose kindness over fury, when you paused before reacting, when you solved what seemed impossible. That was her, Athena, not a war cry, but a whisper. Walk with purpose, think before striking, see clearly even in shadows. And now you too walk with her, through this dream, through this quiet, each step softer, each thought clearer. As Athena's story settles into your heart, by you drift, be deeper by into sleep. Before the waves roared, before the seas split ships and rattled coastlines, there was stillness, the kind of stillness that lies deep beneath, where the sun does not reach, where sound softens to silence, where time does not rush. There ebb in that slow, endless blue, Poseidon slept, not with violence, not with fury, but with weight, the weight of oceans. The god of the sea did not arrive with rage, not first. He came slowly like the tide, a presence not of storm, but of memory. The kind of memory water holds, of all things, of every tear shed, every boat launched, every whisper spoken into the wind. Poseidon was not always the shaker of the earth. Once, he was the listener of its depths. He did not seek Olympus, not at first. He preferred the below, the beneath. While his brothers claimed the skies and the shadows, Poseidon lingered, letting his dominion form around him. The sea was not made in haste, it was made in layers. Currents that curled like sleeping thoughts, caves that sang lullabies through dripping stone, waves that stretched out like arms, reaching, retreating, returning. The sea rocked the world long before it struck it, and Poseidon, in its heart, simply breathed. His trident, forged not to destroy but to command rhythm, to call the moon to pull the tides, to summon fish to gather, then scatter, to stir the coral into bloom, then stillness. He was a conductor, not of noise but of ebb and flow. Where others saw chaos, Poseidon saw pattern. The ocean does not rush, it remembers. When he walked upon the earth he did not roar. He let the mist speak first, a cool whisper drifting into dreams. Salt in the air, hinting of something ancient. Foam licking the rocks, testing the shore's resolve. He watched fishermen, not with envy, but with interest. He watched ships not as intruders, but as stories. He saw their sails swell with wind and pride. He felt their hulls groan with fear and longing. He did not sink them, not yet, not always. Sometimes he guided them, with currents unseen, with dolphins at the bow, with a whisper through the mast, telling them to turn just before the storm. Poseidon knew loss, and that is why he valued grace. He had his temples, yes, built with white stone and prayers, but his true shrine was the shoreline, where land meets surrender, where people pause, barefoot, and listen to the hush of waves, to the voice of something larger than themselves, to the pulse beneath the world. That was Poseidon's altar. No fire, no smoke, just tide. In a dream once a young boy sat beside the sea, afraid of what he could not see. He dipped his toes in and waited, and the sea did not bite. It lapped gently, welcoming, and Poseidon came, not as a god but as a sensation. The water got warmer, the shells nearby glowed soft, the breeze grew kind, and the boy stood no longer afraid. He walked into the water and was held, not swallowed, not crushed, held, and Poseidon watched and said nothing, because some comfort needs no voice. He loved horses not for their fury but for their motion. Their gallop matched the wave, their mane like sea foam, their hearts like tides, wild, yes, but returning always to rhythm. They were ocean on land, and in them he saw himself. Not just rage, but beauty in motion. He once vied for Athens, offered salt and war, but deep down he did not mind losing, for he knew the sea had no walls. Athena built cities, Poseidon built depth. When he returned to the depths after storms, he did not celebrate. He simply watched, as the sand reshaped itself, as the coral regrew, as silence returned. His gift was not just power, but it was restoration. What was broken could return. What was lost could drift back. What was forgotten could resurface. So tonight, as your thoughts ripple like waves and your breath slows like tide, know that Poseidon is there, not as a crashing god, but as a rhythm. the rise and fall of dreams, the gentle rocking of your inner ocean. And as your mind floats soft still, sinking deeper into calm, you may feel his presence, not above, not beside, but within. For we all carry the sea, its hush, its memory, its quiet tides. Sleep now, let the waters cradle you, let the deep take your worries, let Poseidon's lullaby rock you, gently be into stillness. In the stillness above the clouds, where Olympus hums like a sleeping mountain, there is a quiet place, a place where no thunder rolls, no battles break, no poets sing. Only a woman, seated not on a throne but on a stone worn smooth by centuries of still waiting. Her name is Hera, they called her queen, goddess of marriage, of women, of the hearth's sacred bond. But she was more than titles, more than ceremonies and jealous tales. She was the soft tension in a mother's prayer, the quiet strength of a woman standing beside someone who does not see her. She never needed to shout, she never needed to strike, she only needed to stay, and so she did. As Zeus raged across the skiers, mortals rose and fell as temples were built in her name, only to be forgotten. She stayed, watching, not judging, simply keeping her vigil. They misunderstood her. The poets made her cruel, the statues made her stiff, the myths made her bitter, but the truth is gentler. Hera did not hate, she held the stories of women who waited. She held the breath of wives who loved without being loved back. She held the silence between promises made and promises broken. She was not the goddess of revenge, she was the goddess of remembrance. Her eyes, old as starlight, do not blink, not because they cannot, but because they do not need to. She sees everything and chooses what to respond to with silence. Every time a woman watches someone walk away without turning back, Hera feels it. Every time a vow is made with trembling hope and broken with thoughtless ease, Hera sighs, not angrily, not sorrowfully, but knowingly. She is older than thunder, older than fire, older than Olympus. She does not need war. She has time, and in time everything comes home. They said she was jealous, but jealousy is loud. Jealousy is smoke. Hera is stone, quiet, smooth, weathered by pain and patience. She does not burn, she endures. They said she punished women, but she did not. She watched them, she waited with them, she mourned for them, and when they faded from the world, forgotten, abandoned, Hera lit a small flame in the corners of memory, a quiet altar that says, "You were here, you mattered." Her hands are folded in her lap, never clench. Her back is straight, not rigid. Her gaze is calm, not cold. She does not speak often, but when she does, the words are soft and final. I see. Not to scold, not to curse, but to acknowledge. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply not look away. She watches a woman cry alone in her kitchen. She watches a girl whisper a prayer into her pillow. She watches a widow trace her husband's name with trembling fingers, and she does not turn, she does not leave, she stays, she keeps vigil. She does not need lightning, she does not need praise. She has only one purpose now, to remember what others forget, to hold what others let go, to sit with the forgotten until they remember they are seen. Even gods fade, even myths sleep, but Hera remains, not because she must but because someone should. When the last candle in the temple flickered out, when the last priestess set down her cup, when the last marble statue cracked with Hera stayed, not to be worshipped, but to witness. She is the hush in your heart when you're afraid to speak. She is the invisible presence in the room when you feel completely alone. She is the echo of strength that does not shout. And so, if ever you find yourself staring at a closed door waiting for someone who will never come back, holding a vow that no one else remembers, know this: you are not alone. Hera is with you, watching, holding, keeping vigil, silently, faithfully, forever. And in Hera's unvoiced vigil the world is still. The pain is noticed, the waiting is sacred, and in that silence there is peace, the kind that needs no words, no fire, no crown, just presence, just love, unchanging, unseen, but undeniably there. The rivers wind inward, not outward, but down, winding past roots that have never seen sun, winding past stones that remember no warmth, winding into a realm where even echoes go to sleep. This is the underworld, not a prison, not a punishment, but a place of return. And here everything speaks in murmurs. The first sound is soft, a drip, a whisper of water sliding across black rock, not cold, not warm, just there, Then a second sound, the shuffle of footsteps, not running, not hesitant, just quiet, measured, like someone who already knows they cannot go back. They say death is an ending, but in the underworld, death is simply a softening. No more shouts, no more sun, no more questions, only whispers, only the hum of what once was. Hades, the lord of this hushed realm, does not sit on a golden throne. He walks, endlessly, quietly, among the murmurs. He does not speak unless spoken to, and even then, his voice is a breeze that rustles no leaves, because down here there are no trees, only shades and stone and time, endless time. A soul arrives. It does not knock, not cry. It does not plead. It simply enters, as all do, and the underworld welcomes it not with gates but with space. Room to rest, room to reflect, room to unbecome. There are 5 rivers, each with a voice. Leth, the river of forgetting, trickles gently through memory, softening the sharpest sorrows. Souls drink and let go. Names slip away like smoke in sleep. Acheron, the river of pain, does not scream. It murmurs in gentle apologies, carrying the ache of lives lived fully. Styx, the river of oaths, flows with quiet certainty. It does not judge, it simply remembers. Phlegethon, the river of fire, flickers in silence, not burning, but glowing like embers of emotions no longer needed. And Cocytus, the river of wailing, no longer wails. It hums, low and steady, like a lullaby for grief that has nowhere else to go. There is no punishment here, only truth, and truth is not cruel. It is simply what remains when all else is stripped away. The souls do not cry, they murmur, they say, I loved her more than I admitted. I was afraid all the time. I wish I had held their hand longer. I was tired. I didn't know how to say goodbye. And the underworld listens. Hades listens. He does not judge, he does not comfort, he simply hears, and in being heard, the souls begin to rest, not sleep, not vanish, just rest. Persephone walks beside him sometimes, not as a prisoner, not as a queen, but as balance. Where he is still, she is soft. Where he listens, she touches gently. A soul might feel her fingertips on their shoulder, and without words remember what blooming once felt like. Even here, in the deepest dark, there are petals. They do not open loudly. They do not shine. They simply exist, quite bravely, like hope long after it's needed. Sometimes a soul lingers by Leth. It hovers unsure, to forget or to hold on. And Hades does not push. He waits, as he has waited for eons, because everything chooses in its own time. He passes by a soul curled into itself. It murmurs, I was angry. He nods one excuse, not to explain, but to accept, and the soul uncurls just slightly. There are no clocks here, no days, no nights, only rhythm, the rhythm of release. Like exhaling after holding your breath for an entire lifetime. The underworld is vast, but it never feels lonely. It feels full, full of moments left unsaid, full of thoughts unfinished, full of all the things people thought were gone, but weren't. They drift here, gently, like feathers, like sighs, like lullabies for hearts that no longer need to beat. You may think of Hades as stern, but the truth is he is tired, not in weariness, but in knowing. He has seen every kind of pain, every kind of love, every kind of silence, and he carries them all not with burden, but with grace. There are halls in his realm where no one walks, not even him. They are not closed. They are simply waiting for those who one day will come, for the final stories to arrive, for the last echoes of a world that never truly ends. The underworld does not erase. It does not punish. It preserves, not as a museum, but as a memory. A place where all that was once loud becomes soft, where even screams eventually quit and become murmurs. So if you fear the dark, remember it is not empty. It is filled with everything that once mattered, held gently, whispered back to you in voices you'd forgotten you once knew. And when it is your turn, you will arrive, not with dread, not with fire, but with a hush. A soft step into something deeper than anything you've ever known. And the first thing you'll hear will be your own voice, murmuring, I remember now. Then silence, then peace, then home. There is a place where the wind forgets to move. High in the stillness of the mountains, above even the eagles, where clouds seem to pause mid-flight, a single breath continues Prometheus's breath. It is not a sigh, not a cry, but something quieter, a whisper that has never stopped. Long ago, so long that even the stars no longer keep count, he gave a gift. Not gold, not power, but fire. And not fire that burned forests or raised Tempests, but the other kind, the soft fire. the one that lives behind eyes, the fire of thought, of wonder, of why. When the gods watched humankind with distant indifference, it was Prometheus who saw their cold hands, their unlit nights, their confusion in the face of stars. He did not see weakness, he saw potential. And so, he lit a single flame in the cradle of a sleeping mind. That spark, it flickered into curiosity, into music, into story, into everything divine within the mortal. And for this, he was chained. High upon the cragged silence of a forgotten peak, Prometheus lay, not in agony, but in a hush deeper than pain. His punishment was not merely suffering. It was watching as his fire grew in those below, as humans built, and broke, and built again. Every day the eagle came. Its wings sliced the silence like a slow blade. Its beak tore the flesh of his side. But Prometheus did not scream. He exhaled, long, steady, like wind through ancient stone. The gods thought to silence him, but he had already spoken, not with words, but with a gift that could never be taken back: fire, curiosity, creation. And so, with every sunrise, he watched another song be sung, another wheel be turned, another question be asked. The pain was not his focus. The fire was. Sometimes, gathered near his cliff, as if to listen, they curled around his chained limbs and whispered, was it worth it? And though he could not speak, not in the language of mortals, his breath answered, yes, always yes. There was a time he remembered stillness, before the fire, before consequence, when he was only one among many titans, blazing giants who shaped the cosmos. But Prometheus had always felt the hush between the stars. He had always listened to what wasn't said, and in that silence, he heard the longing of mankind. Even before they could form the word, they did not ask him, but he gave anyway. He lit the first ember not with flint or wood, but with compassion, a warmth deeper than logic, more ancient than power. The gods mistook it for rebellion, but Prometheus did not rebel. He believed in hands that fumbled but reached, in eyes that blinked at the sun and still looked up, in hearts that broke but beat again. And so, the flame. He never cried out, not when the eagle tore at his side, not when the chains bit deep, because his cry had already become fire. And fire, once lit, does not weep. It dances, even in shadows. Sometimes a breeze would carry voices up the mountain, a lullaby from a mother below, a story told beside a hearth, a child's laugh in the dark. And Prometheus would close his eyes, not in pain, but in peace, because these were the sounds of his breath, living on. He had given the mortals more than fire. He had given them themselves. He remembered the first time a spark caught, a trembling man crouched near a storm-fallen branch, the air cold, the night heavy, and then a flame, wide eyes, wider heart, tears not of sorrow, but a war. That moment echoed across eternity. He remembered the first pot shaped from clay, the first seed sown not for survival, but for joy. He remembered the first lie, and the first forgiveness after it. Because fire is not only for warmth, it is also for burning away what must be let go. Prometheus watched them learn, fail, begin again. He watched them worship, curse, seek, hide, and never once did he regret. They asked nothing him, they didn't know his name. But every time a match was struck, a candle lit, a forge sparked, if they breathed him, even if they didn't know it. Sometimes he dreamt, or something like it. In these dreams he was not chained. He was wind, he was thought, he was the pause before invention, a flicker in the mind just before something new. And even now, in this moment, you feel it, don't you? A quiet ember beneath your ribs, a whisper between your thoughts. It is not loud, it is not bright, but it is steady. Prometheus's breath has reached you too. It does not demand, it does not shout, it only reminds you were made to wonder. You were made to build. You were made to love what you do not fully understand. And when your fire dims, when your nights stretch long, he is there, not with answers, but with presence, a hum older than language, a warmth that outlives punishment. Even now, high in that place where wind forgets to move, a chained figure watches stars you cannot name. And in that watching, there is hope. Not loud hope, but hope that burns quietly in the hearts of all who dream. Before the battles, before the clashing swords, roaring crowds, or glory carved in marble, there were only footsteps, soft ones, uncertain, worn thin by dust, by the weight of choices, by the longing to matter. This is not the tale of wars. It is the hush before them, the breath before the leap, the soft steps of heroes. Some say heroes are born loud, swords drawn, destinies clear, but the truth is quieter. Heroes are born when no one watches, in silence, in stillness, in nights spent wondering if the path is real. Odysseus once stood by a quiet shore before he became the wanderer of legend. He was not thinking of monsters or gods. He was listening to the waves and wondering, what if I never return? His sandals left no mark. The tide erased them, but the step had already changed him. Achilles once watched his own reflection in a still pond, not admiring, not boasting, just a boy with golden hair and tired thoughts. He whispered, if I die young, will it mean something? His heel brushed the grass. No fanfare, no prophecy shouting, just a soft step toward fate. Even Heracles, strong, stubborn, storm-like Heracles, once wept at the foot of a crossroads. Two paths, one hard, long, full of hardship, the other soft, easy, forgettable. And before choosing, he sat, a cherub hesitating. These are not the stories etched in stone, but they are the ones that matter. Because every hero, before they were loud, was quiet. The soft step is not cowardice, it is consideration. It is the gentle knock at the door of fate. It is the pause, the deep breath, the moment one asks you, do I dare? Perseus did not leap into Medusa's cave. First he stood in shadow, heart galloping like a frightened deer. Then, only then, did he move forward, not because he had no fear, but because he carried it softly. Atalanta, the swift runner of myths, ran not first toward glory, but away from pain. Her steps were soft in forests before they thundered in races. She became legend, but began as a girl walking barefoot toward belonging. Heroes are not sculpted in stone from the start. They are shaped by doubts, quiet choices, gentle refusals to quit. They are those who take one more step when no one cheers. These soft steps echo through time. Each one carries more than weight. They carry wonder, a quiet murmur in every heartbeat. Will this choice define me? Will I lose myself? Is it worth it? And still they move forward, not to chase glory, but to find truth, even if that truth is sorrowful, even if that truth is lonely. Because a hero's first victory is the decision to continue. In some forgotten corner of time, a nameless woman once whispered to the stars, I will protect them. I know one heard, no poems were written, but she stepped into danger anyway. And somewhere, a fire was lit that would never go out. Not every hero wears armor. Some wear silence, kindness, regret. Their weapons are not always swords, but steady hands, open ears, willing hearts. There are heroes in books and heroes in battles, but the quietest ones, they walk among us still. Every time someone chooses compassion over revenge, understanding over pride, courage over comfort, and they echo the soft steps of heroes long forgotten but never gone. Every slow inhale before a hard conversation, every hand extended across fear. Every time someone says, I don't know if I can, but I'll trig, that is heroism. Quiet, unseen, but profound. Even now, in the hush of your own heart, you may feel it. A tremble, a choice, a step not yet taken. You don't need a sword or wings or a prophecy. You only need to begin. So rest, dreamer. Let this story carry you not to battlefields, but to doorways. Let your footsteps be soft, but sure. You are not weak for being afraid. You are brave for listening anyway. And someday, when your story is told, perhaps they won't remember the roar of your name, but they will feel the echo of that moment when you stepped forward into the unknown and whispered, yes, war is loud, they say. Clashing shields, screams in dust, fire leaping into sky. But when you look back far enough, even the loudest battles become quiet. The Trojan War, 10 years of rage, of divine tempests, of fates tangled and snapped, begins not with a battle cry, but a breath, a whisper between goddesses, a golden apple, a choice. And choices, though soft, shape centuries. Paris did not roar when he chose. He spoke simply, offered the apple to beauty, and with that offering, he offered the world to flame. Helen's departure, not a kidnapping, but a drifting. Some say she loved him, some say she was stolen, but the truth lies in silence. In the quiet moment she stood at the prow of a ship, watching Sparta vanish in fog. Agamemnon's wrath, not a scream, but a slow, steady turning, like a door closing, like a tide rising. He called to arms not in glory, but in obligation. His was a crown too heavy for peace, and so they came. Achilles with his shining armor, Odysseus with his clever eyes, Ajax silent as thunder held in muscle. Ships creak-oed, but still, no clash yet, only waiting, only the hush before the storm. The first blood spilled was not heroic, it was a name lost to memory, a spear thrown in fear, a groan drowned in sand. No poet sung of it, but that cry, quiet and real, was the war's true beginning. Achilles, fierce and golden, sat by the sea, not always fighting, often dreaming, of home, of what might be after the rage. Even the greatest warrior knows stillness. Even he felt the salt of tears. Hector, noble and tired, watched from the walls. He loved his city, not glory. He touched his son's hair and wondered, what if I do not return? The war was not in the shout, it was in the pause. One day followed another. Arrows whispered, swords hummed, and between every charge there were hours of silence, men staring into fire, women praying behind stone, gods watching and forgetting to intervene. The gods, too, grew quiet. Aphrodite, tired of wounds, Mars wept beneath his helm. Athena stood still, her wisdom unable to undo what pride had begun. Even Zeus, high and distant, let his lightning sleep. In the tent of Achilles, a lyre strummed softly. He sang. Yes, the destroyer of men sang, to soothe his heart, to remember a life not written in blood. And when Patroclus fell, Achilles did not scream. He knelt, took the boy's body in his arms, and in that stillness the entire war stopped, not by command, but by grief. When Hector died, Troy held its breath. Priam, old and trembling, kissed the hands that killed his son, and Achilles, flooded with silence, wept like a child who'd lost his only friend. There was no victory, only endings. The horse rolled into the city not with shouts, but with wood creaking like old trees. The streets filled not with cries of joy, but footsteps, quiet, reluctant. Fire eventually ate the city, but fire crackles. It doesn't scream. It danced over rooftops like memory, burning away the names of the fallen. Odysseus would wander. Helen would return. Menelaus would forgive in a silence he could never explain. And so, the greatest war of myth ended as softly as it began, with ashes, with questions, dreams unfulfilled. Now, the wind whispers across Ilium, olive trees sway, stones sleep under grass. Children walk where swords once clashed, and no one hears the war. They only feel the silence it left behind. Wars seem loud when they happen, but with time, all that remains is the hush between heartbeats, and the memory of a step, quiet but fateful. War is loud, they say. Clashing shields, screams in dust, fire leaping into sky. But when you look back far enough, even the loudest battles become quiet. The Trojan War, the 10 years of rage, of divine tempests, of fates tangled and snapped, begins not with a battle cry but a breath, a whisper between goddesses, a golden apple, a choice. And choices, though soft, shape centuries. Paris did not roar when he chose. He spoke simply, offered the apple to beauty, and with that offering he offered the world to flame. Helen's departure, not a kidnapping but a drifting. Some say she loved him, some say she was stolen, but the truth lies in silence. In the quiet moment she stood at the prow of a ship, watching Sparta vanish in fog. Agamemnon's wraith, not a scream, but a slow, steady turning, like a door closing, like a tide rising. He called to arms not in glory, but in obligation. His was a crown too heavy for peace, and so they came. Achilles with his shining armor, Odysseus with his clever eyes, Ajax, silent as thunder held in muscle. Ships' oaths creaked, but still, no clash yet. Only waiting, only the hush before the storm. The first blood spilled was not heroic. It was a name lost to memory, a spear thrown in fear, a groan drowned in sand. No poet sung of it, but that quiet and real was the war's true beginning. Achilles, fierce and golden, sat by the sea, not always fighting, often dreaming of home, of what might be after the rage. Even the greatest warrior knows stillness. Even he felt the salt of tears. Hector, noble and tired, watched from the walls. He loved his city, not glory. He touched his son's hair and wondered, what if I do not return? The war was not in the shout, it was in the pause. One day followed another. Arrows whispered, swords hummed, and between every charge there were hours of silence. Men staring into fire, women praying behind stone, gods watching and forgetting to intervene. The gods, too, grew quiet. Aphrodite, tired of wounds, Mars wept beneath his helm. Athena stood still, her wisdom unable to undo what pride had begun. Even Zeus, high and distant, let his lightning sleep. In the tent of Achilles a lyre strummed softly. He sang. Yes, the destroyer of men to soothe his heart, to remember a life not written in blood. And when Patroclus fell, Achilles did not scream. He knelt, took the boy's body in his arms, and in that stillness the entire war stopped, not by command, but by grief. When Hector died, Troy held its breath, Priam old and trembling, kissed the hands that killed his son, and Achilles, flooded with silence, wept like a child who'd lost his only friend. There was no victory, only endings. The horse rolled into the city not with shouts, but with wood creaking like old trees. The streets filled not with cries of joy, but footsteps, quite reluctant. Fire eventually eat the city. But fire crackles, it doesn't scream. It danced over rooftops like memory, burning away the names of the fallen. Odysseus would wander. Helen would return. Menelaus would forgive in a silence he could never explain. And so, the greatest war of myth ended as softly as it began, with ashes, with questions, with dreams unfulfilled. Now, the wind whispers across Ilium, olive trees sway, stones sleep under grass, children walk where swords once clashed, and no one hears the war. They only feel the silence it left behind. Wars seem loud when they happen, but with time, all that remains is the hush between heartbeats, and the memory of a step, quiet but fateful. He left Troy, not with a cheer, but with the wind at his back. Odysseus, man of many turns, stepped onto the sea with eyes that had seen too much, and the ocean hummed its welcome, not loud but endless. Home was a whisper in his heart. Penelope, Telemachus, Ithaca, names he repeated in the quiet like prayer. But the sea's a patient god. It bends time, breaks certainty, and so began the long unraveling. The lotus eaters did not speak. They offered fruit and forgetfulness, and Odysseus almost let go of his name. But memory, like an ember, burned steady. He turned the ship around. The Cyclops roared, but even Polyphemus could not drown the clever hush of Odysseus' plan. No one, he said, and vanished in smoke. Iülus gave him wind. The crew loosed it, not out of malice, but of longing. Sometimes the heart breaks what it tries to save. Circe sang, her voice like warm mist. A year passed in softness. Odysseus lay in her halls, but his soul stood at the threshold. Eyes turned westward. In the land of the dead, shadows whispered. Anticlea's voice, his mother, was quieter than the wind. She spoke of home, of the age in absence, and Odysseus wept, not in fear but in remembrance. The sirens did not shout. They called in harmony so soft that men forgot everything but the sound. He heard, bound and breathless, and lived, because he wanted home more than wonder. Scylla screamed, Charybdis gurgled. But the real terror was in the silence left by each loss. Sailors snatched into sea without time for goodbyes. The sun god's cattle grazed peacefully. Before wrath fell, Zeus shattered the sky. The ship broke. Only Odysseus floated on driftwood, a man cradled by regret. Calypso's island was full of quiet. 7 years passed in the hush of paradise, but he longed for the imperfections of home. Even silence can be a cage. At last, release. He built his raft from hope and memory. Poseidon fought him, waves towered, but a heartened to home he cannot drown. He landed in Ithaca's shore like a shadow, unseen, unknown, but the earth knew his feet. The olive trees bowed softly. Penelope knew in silence, not from his words but his eyes. Their reunion was not loud. A single touch, a tear, a bed carved from a tree. Telemachus stood taller. A boy groaned while waiting. They did not speak long. Fathers and sons share marine glances. And so, the wanderer returned, but he never truly arrived. Some part of Odysseus still hears the sea, still sees ghosts, still walks silently among dreams, because journeys do not end. They echo, and in every quiet choice, every whispered prayer, every road walked alone, you will hear him. Odysseus, the man who came home through silence. They floated through a sea without end, where waves whispered red secrets in the dark. The crew slept lightly, every breath a tremble. Odysseus, alone, faced the horizon, and what sang beyond it. The sirens did not shout. Their song was stillness, a melody that drifted between waves, a softness so divine it stole thought, a lullaby for wandering minds. Wax, he pressed it into their ears with care. Men stared ahead, hands trembling, hearts louder than drums. Odysseus asked for rope, not for safety, but for remembrance. He wanted to hearth impossible and live. They came, not monsters, not beasts, but beauty, wrapped in loss. Their eyes glistened with memory. Their song was not a lure, but a mirror. It showed youth, home you missed, the face you loved, the time you let slip by. Odysseus heard it all, the laughter of Penelope, the first word off Telemachus, his father's last look, his mother's final sigh, and for a moment he screamed to be released, but no one heard, because silence was the only way to survive the sirens. The crew rode beyond the edge of temptation with deaf ears and steady hands. When the song faded, it left a hole, a quiet wound. Odysseus wept, not from sorrow, but from knowing how beautiful illusion can be. The sirens watched as the ship passed. They did not chase, they only hummed, a note too quiet for the world, and slipped beneath the waves, not defeated, not angry, but eternal, because someone always listens, even if they don't return, even if they cannot stay, even if all that's left is an echo, and in that echo the sirens sing still, not to lure, but to be remembered. The world no longer listened as it once did. Temples stood empty, altars cold, sacrifices forgotten, not from rebellion, but from time. Time, that slow unraveling, that gentle forgetting. Zeus, high upon Olympus, no longer raised storms, he watched. Not the mortals below, but the sky itself, a sky that once answered him, now soft with silence. Hera's hands folded in her lap. She no longer fought, she no longer sought. Her throne was a chair of memories, not of rule. Her strength remained, but it moved inward. Apollo's harp sat untouched, its strings loose, its voice sent. He walked beaches now, not to inspire, but to listen to waves sing in his place. Ars grew tired of war, not defeated, but bored. He sharpened no blades, he argued with no gods. He stared at fields overgrown with peace, and did not lift a hand. Athena taught no more. Her wisdom settled like dust in old scrolls. She watched mortals create their own truths, their own errors, their own courage, and she let them. Dionysus faded quietly between vines and sleep. Even celebration can tire the soul. He closed his eyes under moonlight and dreamed of silence. One by one, the gods stepped back. Not in shame, not in defeat, but because they were no longer needed. Not loudly, gently. The seasons still rose, the seasons still turned, the sea still moved, not by divine hand, but by rhythm, by balance, by the world learning to breathe on its own. And in that twilight, not dark, but cold, quiet, the gods became more than rulers. They became presence. They became myth. They became part of the silence that cradles everything. Olympus still stands, but it hums now with peace, not power. The gods remain, not seen, not summoned, but felt. In the soft moment before a storm, when the sky holds its breath. In the silence before sleep, when memory touches dream. In the pause between words, where meaning lives. This is not the end of gods. This is their twilight, where they rest, where they listen, and where, from time to time, some gentle soul might whisper their name again, not to ask, not to beg, not to command, but to remember.